Hello. Thank you for tuning in to the Keto Answers podcast. I am your host, Dr. Anthony Gustin, and this week joining me is Dr. Daniel Pompa. Dr. Pompa is a very, very well-trained expert in all things cellular detox. So all the stuff you know about detox, just throw it out the window. So everything about the liver cleanse and this cleanse and that cleanse and juicing and all that different stuff. Daniel here rips it apart. And I think, frankly, this is the conversation we needed to have. I get a lot of questions about detoxing and all this different stuff. And that, along with his expertise in fasting and how that complements detoxing, this episode is just action-packed. So hope you enjoy. If you have any problems with fatigue and things like that, this could be a real eye-opener for you that there's different ways to go about it. And sometimes you need to start from the beginning and treat your cells right to get the progress you want. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Dr. Pompa. But before we get started, I want to let you guys in on a little secret. And that is that we have some brand new keto bar flavors. And so the same thing that we had with the almond butter brownie that you guys loved and went crazy about, I think we sold out in 5 days when we released that one. We have lemon poppy seed and salted caramel. So these two are just ridiculous. The lemon poppy seed tastes exactly like a frosted lemon poppy seed muffin or cake or whatever you buy at Starbucks that is delicious, but it kills you. So don't buy those things. And then also salted caramel, which tastes pretty much like it says, so salted caramel. So these things are great, on the go, as a treat, whatever. Same standards we have with the other bar. So we tested blood sugar with this, no blood sugar spike, no effect in ketone levels, actually increased a couple of team members' ketone levels. And otherwise the exact same. We actually bumped the collagen from 10 to 11 just because, 10 grams is enough. So we had to go 11. Otherwise, these things are amazing. So if you want to try them out before they go to stock, which may happen very, very soon, we just launched them at perfectketo.com and use the code NEWKETOBARS to get 20% off your order this whole month. So go stock up now. And if you already have, then go grab your favorite flavor. Mine is the lemon poppy seed. Unwrap that little sucker and enjoy it for this show. Dr. Pompa, thank you for being on the show today.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So you have a very interesting background. It's a chiro fam here. I'm also a chiropractor, so getting into it. Why don't you just tell folks a little bit about your background and how you got started to interested in health in the first place to where you are now?
Oh gosh, I ironically enough became a chiropractor because I had a hurt neck. My whole life is pain to purpose, and it's funny. I was raised by an Italian bricklayer who didn't ever give me a medication. Right? He wasn't vaccinated just because my grandmother came from Italy and said, we didn't do that then. We didn't do that there. And back then, I guess it was easier. She just opted out. I had probably an antibiotic one time in my life for probably 2 days when I cut my finger off, and my dad said, you don't need these, and threw them away. I mean, that's kind of my mentality that I was raised with. So I went to a chiropractor, and I just sat in his waiting room and I listened to a guy named Reggie Gold, who I'm sure you know. And I said, gosh, man, that makes a lot of sense to me, right? And then he had me come to one of his lectures, and I was like, this was my life, right? This was easy for me. That's why I didn't go to doctors, body can heal. I kind of was raised with that. But anyways, he kept saying, you have to go to chiropractic school. You really should go to chiropractic school. And I was kind of in between things at that time in my life. A couple years later, I ended up going to chiropractic school. But fast forward, I had a very successful practice, very busy, and then fatigue started and didn't know what was going on. I thought it was overtraining, honestly, and just very busy. I had such a thriving practice and training a lot. So I cut back like most athletes would do, but I wasn't getting better. I was getting worse, actually. Then it went to insomnia. And it went to just debilitating anxiety, panic attacks, massive form.
Yeah. What were the initial symptoms that you had that you knew that something was wrong that you had to pull back from?
Yeah, no, I just started with fatigue, and then I was some headaches started. And then it went from that to where I couldn't sleep at all. I would wake up, couldn't get back to sleep, or I couldn't get to sleep. And then my adrenals were just fried. I couldn't adapt to any stress. I recall, going to the movie with my kids, and I had to leave. I couldn't handle the excitement or the noise. And I remember watching a football game with our neighbors, and same thing happened. I couldn't even handle loud noise. We had two babies at the time, young boys, I should say. One was more of a baby, but I couldn't handle the crying. I couldn't handle anything. I became literally someone I didn't know. I mean, I couldn't handle any stress at all. My personality completely changed. Life as I know it came to a massive screeching halt, and I, like so many people, I was downstream dealing with my adrenals and my thyroid. Some things would get better, but most things were actually getting worse. I became allergic to every food I was eating. I couldn't digest food anymore. So obviously I didn't know what was wrong. And through, about 4 years or so of discovery, I realized I had mercury poisoning. And it was funny because I was online looking for things always when I couldn't sleep. And I came to Mad Hatter's disease. And if you recall what that is, that people making felt hats were using mercury as a part of the process. And I had every symptom. So I went and got a blood test, but it was negative. And it was about a year or so later, I read this endocrinologist book because my thyroid was also really malfunctioning. He was an expert there. So I thought maybe that's the problem. But he said to me one day, Dan, I think you have mercury poisoning. And I said, I thought so too, but I did a test, the blood test. Or he asked me what test. I said, a blood test. He said, wrong test. Challenge it out of your tissue and see if it's there, because I don't think you have acute mercury poisoning, meaning a current exposure. I think you have chronic. And then sure enough, it showed up along with lead and some other metals that I wasn't getting rid of. And then, of course, I asked the logical question, where do you think I got it? And he said, do you have any dental work done around the time this all happened? And as it turned out, I did. I just never correlated it. I had 2 silver fillings taken out, which contained 50% mercury. And it just sent my bucket overflowing. I mean, I had been accumulating it my whole life. I got my first dose, obviously, from my mom because she had silver fillings. And by the way, that's a study. The number of fillings, ladies, in your mouth is proportional to how much ends up in the baby's brain. And by the way, that is where my problem was. It was the mercury in the brain that really caused the problem. In particular, the pituitary hypothalamus is where studies show it ends up. And that's what controls your thyroid and your adrenals. So I knew something upstream was wrong with those 2 glands because I just couldn't regulate my hormones at all. But as it turned out, that was my issue. And I wore contact lenses in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. And there was thimerosal, which contains mercury, in the saline solution. So another brain source of mercury that I had. But so that's it. Everything I teach today really came out of that battle from pain to purpose.
Got it. So just interesting that, that could have been the contributor. Is it if anybody looks in the mirror and opens their mouth and sees any sort of metal, are they at risk of this? And if so, like you said, it doesn't come up on a blood test. Is it just subjective measures? Do we have any tests for this?
Well, you can do a heavy metal challenge. There's no perfect test because really mercury issues and heavy metal issues, it's in the deeper tissue that really causes the problems. And with mercury in particular, the brain. And lead is stored in the bone. But lead is a little easier to test for because it's a little easier to get out of the bone than the mercury is in the brain. But a challenge test, so we challenge the urine. We take a chelator like DMSA or DMPS. It's water soluble. So it has a very short half-life in the body, meaning it grabs onto metals very well, and then it's out of the body quickly. So it makes really a good tester. And but with that said, you're only looking at what's in the body, not the brain, as a reflection of what's in the deeper tissue. So there is no perfect test without doing a brain biopsy, which who's going to do that? So again, a urine test without a chelator, you're not going to show up. Your body's sick people aren't getting rid of it. That's the problem. And of course, it's not going to show up in the blood. If you're getting an acute exposure, it will show up in the blood and urine, meaning a daily exposure of some sort. But it's out of the blood and the urine in about 24 to 48 hours. It goes right into the tissue. So challenging it out is a better way, but keep in mind, it really is not perfect because we're not looking what's in the brain. Got
it. So would anybody with any sort of metal fillings, should they get them removed? What is your recommendation there? Or does it kind of matter?
Those dark silver gray, colored fillings are the ones that contain the mercury. And by the way, look, you can go on, Google it, the smoking tooth. That's a 25-year-old filling. And you watch the mercury vapor pour off of that filling. All you do is chew food, brush your teeth, drink hot coffee. and it pours off the filling for the life of the filling. And I say that because dentists will often say, oh, well, that's an old filling. Most of the mercury's gone anyway. Don't worry about it. And it's not true. So when you look at the studies, and by the way, the DRASH study showed the number of fillings in mom's brain is proportional to how much is in the baby's brain. So, we have these studies to know that this mercury bioaccumulates over the time and years in the tissues. So the answer is to your question is, well, yes, but you have to be careful. I teach a prep protocol to prepare your body a month ahead of that procedure. And then we take some binders in and around the procedure the day of. So when they drill out the filling, what happened to me doesn't happen to you. And again, using real binders to protect the body is critical. And then here's one more caution. After the fillings come out, which many of you listening to this may say, okay, well, I took my fillings out 10 years ago. Well, guess what? The mercury that comes off of that filling is a mercury vapor, and it goes into the brain, crosses the blood-brain barrier. But there it turns to inorganic mercury, which will stay in your brain for your life unless you do the proper detoxification. So therefore, you take your fillings out and you go, oh yeah, actually, maybe I feel a little better or not at all. But years later, you end up with bizarre symptoms, possibly a neurodegenerative condition, whatever it is, hormone condition. And it's that mercury trapped in your brain. So just because you took your fillings out, if you don't do a proper brain phase of heavy metal detox, which is something I teach doctors and the public alike, you're going to end up with a condition years later.
Got it. And so what about the amalgam that they use now for fillings? Is that totally fine? And we're going to find out in 5-10 years that there's some crazy chemical in there that is making people sick?
Well, yeah. I mean, so silver fillings, unfortunately, are still being used, called an amalgam filling. But now they are starting to use some composite fillings, which are white fillings. Some of them have BPA, which is problematic. I would argue that it's not nearly as dangerous as mercury. I think the best fillings are ceramic inlays or onlays. So ceramic fillings are very inert to the body. But so there is safer alternatives today for sure.
And you said that when you had yours removed, you didn't have this protocol in place and you got sicker at that point, or how did that transition?
Yeah, my fatigue evidently started 3 or 4 days after that. I was
after you got them out.
Yeah, after I got them out.
Okay.
So, but looking back through my life, I had sensitivities. I remember when they were putting them in. My neighbor was the dentist, and I remember having bizarre things like these blisters on my feet and hands, which was most likely, I'm sure, from candida, because a lot of pathogens really put themselves in and around these heavy metals to protect themselves from the immune system. So that's another thing is, I looked back and I had so many things that I knew were actually from the mercury. And when I was getting rid of the mercury, I was always battling candida for so many years, but I wasn't able to get rid of it, and parasites, by the way. But I wasn't able to get rid of either until I got the mercury down to a certain point. And then I was able to finally get rid of these nasty pathogens that I battled back. So many people chasing candida and Lyme even, right? And other infections. And really, you have to go upstream even further and realize what's taking the immune system down. What's creating a dysbiosis or affecting my microbiome in my gut that's allowing these things to be there in the first place? Oftentimes, it's heavy metals, or it could be hidden infections, other hidden infections, which can come from the mouth, like root canals and cavitations. These things are deadly and they ruin lives.
Okay. So obviously this is probably a little freaking some people out here, but you went through it. You have programs that help people through that. What are some of the things that you do for detox around or after somebody starts to notice this stuff? Is it, I think that some people think that a detox is just drinking some juice or going in a 5-day juice fast or something like that. What is your concept of detox and how does it apply to how normal people think of a detox?
Yeah. So look, I think detox is becoming more in vogue, meaning people realize today that the reason they can't even lose weight, despite changing their diet and exercise, is toxins. And it's getting out there. Right? Toxins are creating hormone problems. Toxins are creating neurodegenerative conditions, autism. I mean, it's more and more out there to the point where I remember years ago going in Whole Foods or health food stores, and there was maybe one or two detox things on the shelf. Now there's a whole section, right? But here's the problem. All of those detoxes are too far downstream to where the real problem is, and that's the cell. So I have a saying, you have to fix the cell to get well, but more specifically, you have to detox the cell to get well. So those cleanses are typically the 10-day cleanse or whatever it is. I like to call them poopers, meaning they basically just keep the bowels moving, and which is not a bad thing, but it's not going to get you well. I mean, I did all the poopers in the world, and it may help your constipation, but it's ultimately not going to fix the problem, which is a toxic cell. So real detox has to be at the cellular level.
So then what, in your opinion, constitutes a real detox? Is there a generalized one for all humans, for any parts of the cells, or that you look at in different systems, whether that, liver, kidneys, or whatever? Like, where are you looking at here, and how do you break it down personally?
Yeah. So look, there's 3 phases to real detox. You have to have a prep phase where you prepare the cell in its pathways to get rid of toxins. And by the way, I have my 5 R's is what I teach doctors, and now even the public caught on to it. These are the things that the functions of the cell that toxins are destroying and the stressors of life that the cell needs to get rid of toxins. When it makes energy, a cell, it makes toxins. It's like burning wood in your fireplace. It makes a lot of smoke. You have to have a chimney. If it doesn't get rid of the smoke, we die in the home. Well, that's a cell. It'll die if it doesn't get rid of the toxins. So we have to have an ability to get rid of the endogenous toxins. We have to have an ability to get rid of the toxins that make their way into the cell, which they do because cells have fatty membranes and toxins are attracted to fat. So we have to upregulate the functions of the cell that get rid of toxins. That's key. So that's step 1. We have to open up downstream detox pathways. I mean, that's an important step of real detox. And then we have to use real binders. So when you look at these 10-day cleanses or all of these cleanses, they use weak binders. Chlorella and cilantro, they're not real binders. They don't have the ability to grab something like a heavy metal and hold on to it all the way out of the body. So we have to upregulate cell function. We have to open up downstream detox pathways, and we have to use real binders. Those 3 things are critical. Now, it has to be done in 3 phases, meaning that you have to prepare the body, the cell, and the downstream pathways, as I was saying. And then there's what we call body phase, where our goal is just to get rid of the easy to get toxins to set up a concentration gradient so we can go after it where it matters. And that's in the deep tissue, the brain, et cetera. And the last phase is, in fact, the brain phase. And that's how I got my life back. So 3 phases and 3 things that are very critical to real detox.
Okay. So what are some of the things when you're talking about binders or prep that I'm sure you have a lot of the stuff in your website or resources for that, but just to give people an idea of what this looks like. Is it, drinking weird smoothies? Is it taking supplements? What do these phases really look like from day to day? And how long do they take?
Yeah. So, we have made it easier over the years. I mean, I teach doctors, which I call my platinum group, and it's very specific to the person in front of you, meaning the prep phase is getting the cell via my 5 R's upregulated, and then the downstream pathways. There's some products there that support the liver, the kidneys, and the gut. And then the body phase, we bring in the chelators, one of which is cytodetox, which has an ability to bind toxins in the cell and in its membrane, and it's strong chelator. It's able to grab the toxins from the cell and bring it all the way out of the body. And then we use a real binder with 4 different types of binders in it, and it stays in the gut. And the reason is because when you bring toxins out, many of them are reabsorbed back from a leaky gut into the body. So we put this catcher's mitt, this binder product, in the gut to make sure you don't auto-intoxicate. So using a binder from the cell, to the liver and the gut, and then a binder in the gut so you don't auto-intoxicate is critical. So that's something that I teach doctors very specifically, because the dosing, the cycle lengths, so we do like on cycles and then off cycles. So you push hard and then you rest. You detox, then you rest, which is, by the way, how all detox actually works in nature. So real detox should also be cycled. And then we've made a simpler version called True Cellular Detox for the person who isn't as challenged, so to speak, with a serious condition, which has a prep phase, a body phase, and a brain phase. And it's a 90-day protocol.
Got it. So is that pulsatile in nature for 90 days, or is it 90 days on, some days off? How is that structured for time? And like, what should people expect if they're feeling some of these symptoms that are associated with it? Is it immediate or is it more progressive?
Yeah, look, I mean, if you have health challenges, the brain phase, you really should do multiple brain phases. I did brain phases on and off for 4 years. I would say consistently for 2 years. And I would do 3 days on, 4 off, 4 days on, 10 off. I would vary the different cycles. And after a while, somebody kind of knows when to start a cycle, just because eventually they actually feel better on the detox cycles than the off cycles. And but that can change. But anyways, here's what I love to say. It's one of the things that I have a pet peeve on, because detox is so misunderstood. And it's frustrating because people will do a 3-month cleanse, whatever it is, a 6-month cleanse, and think that they've got the heavy metals out of their body. It took years from the womb to the tomb to accumulate it. To think that you're going to get rid of it in just a few months, it really is absurd. What I teach my doctors is teach the person the process so they can continue it long enough to actually matter. So even in my simple True Cellular Detox program, there's a portal to teach the person what they need to do and continue to do. But again, I caution, if you have more serious health challenges, you need a coach, because the dosing will be different for you. With downstream pathways that need more support, like your lymphatic system, that will be different for everybody. So, that's my goal, is training doctors around the country in these protocols, because there's so much bad out there when it comes to detox, so much bad information. It's ridiculous. So I've dedicated my life to this. Obviously I said from the beginning, from pain to purpose.
So are you training MDs, chiros? Is it naturopaths, dentists, just the whole gamut? Anybody who's interested in this?
All of it. Yeah, every one of those. As a matter of fact, some of my own clients that I've brought back to health now are being trained by me and have been trained by me because they're passionate and they get a nutrition degree of some sort online, and they're showing up at my seminars now, just people that are just completely passionate about doing this.
It's amazing. And then just to touch back on I know you mentioned the 5 R's. Can you just list those out for us?
Yeah. So the 5 R's really is where it starts, right? I said that, real detox has to go to the cellular level, and we have to upregulate what the cell naturally should be doing, right? If your cells aren't getting rid of toxins, doesn't matter how many liver cleanses, how many colon cleanses you do, doesn't matter. So, and this is where most detox fails. So I remember coming back from a seminar where I was teaching these cellular concepts to some doctors, and I knew they didn't get it. And I was frustrated on the airplane. And then it just came to me. And I'd have to give credit to God there, because I always say I'm not smart enough to come up with these. It just came. And our number one is the obvious. You have to get rid of the sources in your life. Meaning, if you have silver fillings, right? I mean, you're going to detox mercury out of the brain and you still have silver fillings in your mouth, it's going to keep accumulating in the brain. Or if you're in a moldy home, or if you have these hidden infections like root canals or cavitations, you have to look for these hidden causes. And our number one is all about that. And I do many lectures just on that. Our number 2 is regenerating the cell membranes. I said that how important it is for the cell to be able to get rid of toxins. Well, toxins come and they make their way to these membranes, and you have 50 to 70 trillion cells in your body. Toxins inflame the membrane. Now you can't get good stuff in the cell needed for detox and just energy, period. And you can't get the toxins out. So again, it's like the wood burning in the fireplace, right? The smoke fills the home. That's what's happening in your cells. Now you have malfunctioning cells, which lead to cancer, fatigue, brain fog, whatever else. So the membranes are critical. Matter of fact, there's a guy named Bruce Lipton who wrote a book called The Biology of Belief, and he's a stem cell biologist, brilliant guy. But he showed that the cell membrane is the key to turning off bad genes that have been turned on, meaning your thyroid condition, your weight condition, obesity, whatever it is. Genes get triggered. So genes, we don't treat genes because genes don't make us sick, but genes can be turned on. But the best part is they can be turned off. And he talks about how fixing the membrane is the critical component to turning off bad genes. So regenerating the cell membrane is R2. R3 is restoring cell energy. It's critical for detoxing the cell. You will go nowhere in detox without upregulating that cell energy again. And then 4 is reducing the inflammation of the cell. And it sounds like the obvious, but it's often not done correctly. So a lot of my fasting work and dietary work that I've written about is a critical component with that one. And lastly is the reestablishing methylation is our number 5, which methylation is one, it has many functions in the body, including turning on good genes and turning off bad genes, but also it detoxes the cell. Methylation parallels something called glutathione, which is how the cell detoxes. So if methylation is low, glutathione will be low, the cells get more toxic. So anyways, those are the 5 R's.
So it's not as easy as just taking a glutathione or NAC supplement then.
Yeah, if it were only so simple, right? Matter of fact, when people take those things, most of the glutathione doesn't get in the cell anyway. There's many steps on how to upregulate glutathione, methylation being one of them. But yeah, it's a process that I teach.
Got it. Sounds amazing. What about things that can help along the way? I mean, are you a fan of infrared saunas, things like that? What are the environmental things that people could have that would help along the way?
Yeah, no, I am a fan of infrared saunas, but again, when people do an infrared sauna and they think that's going to be their detox that is going to make them well, no, it can be part of true cellular detox, but in and itself, it won't get the heavy metals out of the brain and the deep tissue, no. But I absolutely love it to open up the skin as another pathway. I love coffee enemas. They help push the bile out of the liver, which when you detox the cells, a lot of the toxins make their way to the liver and they bind up into bile. And bile is dumped into the intestines to digest fat and can carry the toxins along with it. Or the bile just stays in the liver and gallbladder, and it's called hepatic, meaning liver, biliary, meaning bile, sludge, meaning a toxic, thick sludge that affects your digestion, backs up your liver. So a coffee enema can actually be utilized to push that bile out. But caution, that I mentioned that bind product that we use as a catcher's mitt to sit in the gut so you don't reabsorb toxins. Well, when you push that bile out via a coffee enema, you'll push that toxic bile into the gut. You'll reabsorb it unless you push it into a catcher's mitt like this bind product. So it's very important to utilize that with a coffee enema. So yeah, I like the support of that. I like even other types of light energy, like a Juve light uses different red waves, red light and near infrared, which are very good for deeper detox as well. So yeah, I like all of those things.
Yeah, I stacked my Juve light actually again. So half or a fourth of my sauna has glass on it. And so I put the Juve light facing it so that I double it up.
It's awesome.
And then as far as nutrition and how that plays a role, I mean, what are the types of foods that you're generally, detox or not recommending for people?
Yeah, look, you don't want to increase glucose and insulin because it's a fast way to drive more cellular inflammation. So you have to, going on a low-carb diet, getting rid of grains and sugar in the diet is going to be one of your sharpest tools in the shed to control inflammation. I always say this, though, the perfect diet today won't get you well, but you won't get well without a perfect diet, meaning we have to control the inflammation, and getting rid of these inflammatory foods is controlling glucose and insulin is vital. Another missing component, a lot of people eat healthy diets but they're eating things with canola oil in, because things in Whole Foods and health food stores still have these vegetable oil and canolas in them, oils in them. So it's very important to change the fats that you're getting in your diet. And again, it's hidden things. A lot of people think saturated fat and cholesterol are the bad ones. Actually, they're stabilizing for the cell membrane and the hormone receptors that are on the cell membrane. But it's these vegetable oils and unstable other, like even fish oil that people are ingesting, very unstable, could be very damaging. So you have to have stable oils.
Got it. So do you like using a ketogenic diet, or more so just low carb, or depends per person?
I have a principle that I teach is called diet variation. And I'm not one to say stay in ketosis all the time. I move people in and out of the state. And I believe that every ancient culture moved in and out of different diets. They were forced to, whether it was environmental changes, just lack of food for many reasons, droughts. I mean, there's many, many reasons why, and just seasonal changes. But today we don't have to change diets, but more studies are showing that it's detrimental. So I move people in and out of ketotic states. I call it diet variation. And so seasonally, I'm a fan of changing the diet. I'm a fan of even doing it monthly and weekly. One of the things that happens to people when they stay very low carb for a long time, the body, all it wants to do is survive. So it will think it's starving, and it will start to do things to make you hold on to your fat, and actually you'll start to lose muscle. Let me give you an example. So when the cells can only use two things for energy, sugar or fat. When we get into a state of ketosis or very low carb, we're forcing the cell to only use fat, or the majority of energy from fat, which is great. However, when you stay there longer, what happens is the body will say, okay, if this is my only energy source, I'm going to be much more efficient with it. So what does it do? It slows down fat metabolism. So what we've learned is that when we throw in 1 or 2 days a week where we do high healthy carbs, or even 5 days a month, it reminds the body it's not starving, and it can go ahead and keep burning its fat. And it fires up the fat burning machine again. A great example is like if you're in the middle of the woods in a harsh winter and you have a wood pile, and that's your only source of heat, right, and energy. And this winter ended up to be far worse than the others, and you're going through your wood very quickly. You realize, I may not make it through the winter. So what are you going to do? You're going to burn less wood, meaning you're going to burn less fat. And instead of being at 70 degrees, you'll bring it down to 60 degrees just to survive. Well, that's your metabolism getting lower and lower, right? Just not to burn its fat supply or the wood supply. And then someone comes by and says, if we have plenty, and your neighbor gives you a lot more wood, well, guess what? You fire up the fat burning again. You start burning more wood, right? So, I mean, that's what I call this feast-famine cycles. I've developed this, and we have different combinations. I'll just give you a very simple one. 5-1-1. So 5 days in ketosis. We do 1 day of feasting, which is always my Saturday. And then we do 1 day of fasting where we either don't eat or just eat one meal. And what that does is it allows your body to get more used to using your own fat as an energy source when you're not eating. But that feast day is very critical. So sometimes we do more than one feast day. People with thyroid conditions and women seem to do better with a couple feast days a week. Thyroid people as well. And even 5 days a month, we learned that taking a feast day 5 to 7 days before a woman's cycle is transformative, because you need high insulin to make certain hormone conversions. For example, stored thyroid hormone T4 to an active form T3, which you need to burn fat and feel good. You need insulin to make that conversion, as well as certain other hormones like estrogen. So therefore, women crave carbohydrates the week before their period. So just, it's an innate intelligence telling you, I need some more sugar to make more insulin to make these hormone conversions. But what it does by doing that 5 days is the rest of the month hormonally, it transforms, especially women, and it works for men too. But you hear that, women can't fast, or women can't intermittent fast, or women don't do well in ketosis. Well, they just need more variation. So these strategies are something that help you fat adapt, control inflammation, and they work.
Right. And I'm certainly not a woman who has periods by any means, but the intuitive eating as well is something that I prescribe to. And so, I mean, this will freak out a lot of people who do ketosis all the time. I think that it's the only way to do it. Whenever I crave carbs, and recently it's been way more, I'll stock up. Like right now in my kitchen, I have purple sweet potatoes, plantains, things like that. And I mean, when you're eating real food sources, you can't really go overboard. It's not like I go crazy on bread and rice and pasta and things like that, or in terms of sugars. It's just like, I mean, good luck eating over 50 grams of carbs of a sweet potato. Like, it's just not going to happen. But then I do that for a couple of days or to whenever I'm not craving it, and then I stop doing that. And it seems to work very well for me. And yeah, I mean, it's something that I think that people get a little too crazy about, and thinking that it's all or nothing, and that if you have any sort of carbs, they're going to kill you. And I think that as long as you have stuff that spoils in real food, I think that you can pop it in when you're craving it, like you said, and eat more intuitively. But I think that sometimes when people are coming from more of a standard American diet, eating a lot of vegetable oils and sugars, they have no sense of their body about what they actually should be craving. The craving signals are just so confusing. I don't know if you've seen that at all.
Yeah, no, it is. And that's why, you can make a change. Here's part of the variation. You have your different camps. You have your vegans, your vegetarians, your paleo, your ketos, right? And the list goes on. The reason people are so hardcore in those camps is because when they come off the standard American diet, they feel better. Mm-hmm. I interviewed a guy the other day. He told a story, and he went to a vegan diet and felt better, and then he didn't. Then he went to or it was a vegetarian diet. Then he went to vegan and it felt better than he did. Then he became a fruitarian, where he just ate fruit. Guess what? He felt better, and then he didn't. And I would argue the same, even for paleo. You feel better, but we know staying in high protein too long stimulates a pathway called mTOR, which it creates premature aging. It's not good. Ancient cultures were in and out of different diets. There's a benefit. They thought the Hunza people were vegetarians because they only visited them in the summer. But in the winter, they were full-blown ketosis. The American Indians, same way. There was times where they were very high carb. So yes, we know to get into ketosis, we want to keep our carbohydrates on average under 50. But when I put someone on these feast days or cycles, I want their carbohydrates to be 100 to 200. I want their body to say, I have plenty. And I want their body to start making these hormone conversions. When you go to these low carb events, and I've been to all of them, you see people, the people that the body bodybuilders learned this years ago. It's like your body will start utilizing muscle for energy when it needs to. You get quick sugar through gluconeogenesis, and it will start holding on to fat in those wrong places. But when you throw in some of these variations, and it's different for everybody, you figure out what works for you. But the magic is the feast famine cycle, the variations. The magic is also these fasting days, or fasting periods. I'm ready to start another 5-day water fast. And I do at least 3 of those a year. But also I do times of high protein to stimulate mTOR. I don't want to stay in that pathway, but it can be a very healing pathway too. So fasting stimulates a pathway called autophagy, which means your body will eat its bad tissues. It'll leave the good tissues and cells alone. But it literally is so smart that during a fasting state, to get energy and to get protein to heal, it will take all of your malfunctioning cells and all of your debris and utilize that for energy. And that's called autophagy, which was the 2016 Nobel Prize was won by a Japanese man who talked about autophagy and how incredible it is for autoimmune, how incredible it is for neurodegenerative conditions and hormone conditions. Getting rid of bad cells is critical. That pathway is critical. However, you can stay in that pathway too long and it works against you. The opposite pathway is the mTOR, where you're eating high protein or high calories like bodybuilders like to do. Again, short term, that can drive some healing. You stay in that pathway and no doubt you'll die sooner and develop new problems. But the feast famine cycles that I teach, it's really putting you in an autophagy state and then an mTOR state. We want the variation, and studies show that the variation is really critical. So when they look at studies, either consistent low carb or consistent low fat, whatever diet, when they compare it to people who go up and down the alterations, feast famine, It wins out every time as far as health, longevity, and weight loss. So varying your diet is critical. And I've been speaking that a lot of these, matter of fact, I don't think they let me back to low carb USA, but it's not a popular message there, but needless to say, it's still true.
Right. And this is one of the things that I've been saying for a long time as well. It just makes sense evolutionarily. And I've felt best on it. And I've had a lot of people that I've worked with that have felt incredible on it. And I mean, even the carnivore community that's coming out, and a good example of, like you said, people try, they feel amazing. And I suggest, and I've been talking to some people about maybe doing like you said, some maybe carnivore days mixed in with some vegetarian days and then some fasting days in getting some variance in there, because that's probably what it looks like. But staying on that for the rest of your life just sounds like madness to me.
Yeah, well, that's why you kind of like, it really isn't, because, my Saturdays is my feast day. And, and again, I mean, if you have health challenges, pay attention, eat more sweet potatoes, yams, some wild rice or quinoa, or, stick to the healthier carbs. But if you're going to throw in the pizza, there's the day to do it, right? If you're healthy and you can do that, great. But, what I do during the week is on my busy days, I fast, right? I eat just one meal. So I did that 3 times this week. I was very busy, and I just, it becomes part of your life. When I travel, it's so easy to do those as my fast days. So it's really darn easy. I don't plan those days. They just happen. Some days it's my feast day Sunday, not Saturday, but you don't have to be, I say 5-1-1 because it gives people a structure. And then oftentimes I move them to a 4-2-1 where I throw in 2 fasting days and 1 feast day, but it can be as random as you want it. And it really, it's easy.
Yeah. One of the things that I like to tell people that have some struggling with fasting past even 8 a.m. in the morning is, get on like a probably even a high amount, a high food amount, high caloric amount of a ketogenic diet and get fat adapted first. Then your body can start using your fat for fuel. I think that if you just go from a standard American diet, eating 300-400 grams of carbs a day, and then switch to trying to do fasting, I mean, it's going to be terrible.
No, I agree. My new book's coming out called Beyond Fasting, and it's a 7-week program. And it leads you through being fat adapted first. Then it leads you into daily intermittent fasting. And then it leads you into my diet variation principles that I'm discussing. And then it leads you into a fast. And a 5-day fast is what we do, because day 4, you get this maximum autophagy effect, especially when you're fat adapted. You actually could start getting that effect even earlier in the fast. But what happens is when your body starts getting rid of these bad cells, the miraculous part is it raises up stem cells, your own stem cells, to replace those cells that were used for energy and healing. So the influx of new stem cells is incredibly healing. We've just discovered this of one of the reasons why fasting is so healing. And you don't have to do, in my book, I give you choices. You don't have to do a pure water fast. You can do what is called a fasting mimicking diet, which we provide boxes of food under a certain amount of calories and under a certain amount of grams of protein that will keep this autophagy still going. And it's a box of food for 5 days, 1 box every 5 days. And I've been working with Prolone and the scientists there, and as one of their spokespeople. But anyway, so it can be different fasts that you do, but this lead up to the fast maximizes this autophagy and maximizes your own stem cells. Just to give you an idea how powerful this is that one of the things years ago when I studied fasting, it was criticized is, it lowers your immune system because we see this massive drop in white blood cells during a fast. And we didn't have a scientific answer for that, except that all we can tell you is it seems to have a massive regulation on autoimmune and allergies, food allergies. So we know the immune system somehow gets better. But what has recently been studied, Walter Longo is an Italian scientist who actually created that fasting mimicking diet that I spoke about. But what he found is yes, we get this massive drop in white blood cells because of autophagy. So the body is so smart, it takes out the overactive white blood cells that are living too long, causing mischief, driving inflammation. It's, driving autoimmune and sensitivities because they've lived too long and they're not good cells, right? And then what happens is once it gets rid of those, the stem cells come and it creates more naive white blood cells that aren't overreactive, causing mischief, driving hypersensitivities. So now we have a scientific answer for why it can downregulate autoimmune and have such a positive effect with so many inflammatory conditions. So when we do this program, we step by step, all the way up to the fast, which happens week 6. By doing it, you maximize the autophagy and the stem cell production. It's magic.
Right. And this is one of the things too, I've done a lot of testing on myself as far as blood work at day 0, day 5, and then 5 days, 7 days after fasting. And yes, everything decreases. My weight decreases, my muscle mass decreases, my immune system, every growth hormone, testosterone. But then afterwards, I always have a super compensation period where I blast past where my baseline was before. And last weekend I did a 3-day fast. I wasn't feeling that great. 3 days in, my ketone levels weren't really bumping up, so I was just kind of a little lethargic. So I broke it. But even after 3 days, I like to do around 5 or 7 days as well. Then I had, the 3-4 days, even now afterwards, I feel incredible. And this is something that I don't think a lot of people get to that point, and they think that, just after the first 24 hours that there's no added benefit. And I think that there's a lot of conflicting information about when autophagy actually occurs, and if it's you can do it enough in intermittent fasting in a day, 18 hours or what. So, but you're saying that around 4 days is the kind of the sweet spot.
Well, that's when we see this maximum autophagy happen, and then day 5 we see a maximum stem cell. We see this like massive rise, and of course, as you said, growth hormone seems to really hit high on day 5 as well. But with that said, the reason I do this program ahead, if you go into the fast, fat adapted, you start getting autophagy even at 15 hours of fasting, some autophagy, right? And then each day it's getting more. So now if you go into the fast, non-fat adapted, yes, some people get very little autophagy or they won't start much autophagy until day 4. But if you go in fat adapted, and that's really what my program gets with the diet variation. We're getting people very, very fat adapted ahead. We see really high autophagy and stem cell production even sooner than the 5 days. So we're maximizing the results and making the fast, much easier. So look, this all came for years of studying this stuff, and also I train doctors. So through the experimentation with the doctors, we've learned how to maximize these fasts in this way. And it's one fast is not the answer typically. This should become, part of your life. It really should. Our DNA is literally set up for this.
Is there anything that you're doing to track stem cell production or autophagy right now? Or at least getting it?
Yeah, no, you can only, we look at glucose and ketones during the fast, obviously, and even before that, as a reflection of how fat adapted you are. And that is a reflection of how much autophagy we're going to create. So we use a device that looks at glucose and ketones. And with that, you're looking, one of the things we want to see is we test in the morning and then later in the day as we're fasting. We want to see glucose trending down and ketones trending up as an indicator that you're becoming fat adapted and your brain is utilizing the ketones.
Are you looking at a glucose ketone index at any certain ratio, or?
Well, we want to get to a 1-to-1 ratio. Right. And that means you have to basically take your glucose, let's say it's 80, divide it by 18, and then you'll get like your 3.5. And that's the 1-to-1 ratio for ketones. So beta hydroxybutyrate in the blood with the finger prick is measuring beta hydroxybutyrate. And it's going to come out as a number like, 2.0, right? So the 1-to-1 ratio, which represents we're crossing into maximum autophagy, we want that 1-to-1 ratio. So 3.5 to 3.5 is an example.
Yeah. I usually get there around 3 days. And this time it wasn't even close to 3 days. So that's why I decided, I wasn't feeling great, decided to cut it. What about other types of fasting that, have becoming more popular, like dry fasting, things like that?
Yeah, dry fasting, I wouldn't attempt unless you're healthy, and I wouldn't do any type of water fasting without supervision. Honestly, I mean, if you're on medications, that can be complicated. So I'll just make that statement up front. Dry fasting is similar. I going to my first day will be a dry fast on my fast here next week. But dry fasting, it gets more autophagy. Some estimates are 3 to 1. We don't know how accurate that is because there's really no study there. But the reason is when you dry fast, let's back up. That means no water, right? You're drinking no food, no water. Now, people are going, what? You can live with that? My son went almost 4 days.
Oh my God.
But here's why. Because your body's smart. So what does it do? It breaks fat cells down like no other. So the autophagy goes through the roof because there's water in cells, especially in fat cells. So you get this massive burning of fat cells and autophagy, and of course it goes after the bad cells. So by dry fasting, you increase all of your autophagy and therefore your stem cell production on the back end of it. Look, every religious group disagrees on just about everything, right? Even prayer, right? The only thing that every religious group agrees on is fasting. And many of these religious fasts are dry fasts,
right?
So there is a component of benefit to this.
And action-packed episode, Doc. Where can people find some more of this if they want some resources on, you said you have a new book coming out, the cellular detox programs, if following you online?
drpompa.com, drpompa.com.
Got it. And then anywhere else as far as programs or anything, or they can just find everything at drpompa.com?
Yeah, I mean, my you can go to my Facebook, my fan page where I do videos on these fasting principles, and that's Dr. Pompa. Not to be confused because my website doesn't have the dot, but Dr. Pompa is my Facebook.
All right. Thanks for your time, Doc.
Yeah, man. Absolutely.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Keto Answers podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, but even if you didn't, I would love a review. Just go over to iTunes, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and pop in a review so we can get found by more people, get better guests, and have the information that you need. So please go to iTunes, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and leave us a review. And if you're new to keto, head on over to perfectketo.com/podcast and enter your email for all our top tips and guides on getting started with the ketogenic diet. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.